How does Bethesda use subtle storytelling to create Fallout 3's immersive universe? Let's find out. War may never change, but the game development landscape can be as fluid and treacherous as a stormy sea. As technology evolves, vast opportunities for immersive storytelling move to the forefront, and companies find themselves able to create engaging experiences. The Grand Theft Auto franchise, for example, went from arcade-style action with inconsequential violence to worlds teeming with life, personality, and stories full of colorful characters. Half-Life went from a chaotic world with somewhat sporadic storytelling to a vast universe rich with detail and clever exposition. The GTA and Half-Life franchises both evolved in big ways as time and technology advanced. As the technological landscape evolves, so do the stories and experiences created by game developers. For years, the Fallout franchise has captured the minds of players with its robust lore, its war-torn landscapes, and its intriguing NPC factions. To really drive home the narrative of the Wasteland, the designers had to meticulously craft set pieces and scenes to quietly tell the sad, funny, and sometimes horrifying stories that the Wasteland has to offer. In this episode of Game Dissection, I'm going to cover how the gameplay mechanics and narrative of Fallout 3 aid in the realization of the Fallout world. For the uninitiated, I'm about to provide a quick overview of what Fallout is, more specifically Fallout 3. If you already know all about Fallout 3 and you don't really want to hear about it, click one of the annotations below and skip this section and move on to the rest of the episode. Fallout 3 is a role-playing game created by Bethesda Game Studios that takes place in the dark and dangerous ruins of Washington, D.C., also known as the Capital Wasteland. Fallout 3 is the fourth game in a franchise and originally developed by Interplay Entertainment. The story starts in the year 2277, 200 years after a devastating nuclear war between the United States and China tore the country and the world to pieces. In preparation for the nuclear war, the Vault-Tec Corporation constructed large vaults to house small populations of humans and protect them from the destruction of the nuclear blasts. You start your journey as an inhabitant of Vault 101 with its ever-pleasant introduction.
It was here you were born. It is here you will die. Because in Vault 101, no one ever enters, and no one ever leaves.
You live in the vault with your father, until, in the pursuit of a noble cause, he leaves the vault and abandons you. This incurs the wrath of the tyrannical and despotic overseer, who seeks to capture and probably kill you, thinking that you had a hand in your father's escape. Impending horrible death, as good a motivator as any, forces you out of the cold, artificially lit tunnels of the vault and into the dead and dangerous wasteland. The game plays in the style of a real-time shooter, allowing the player to switch between first and third-person perspectives. This is a big change from the isometric perspective of the original games that feature turn-based combat using a system called VATS. VATS, or the Vault-Tec Assisted Targeting System, allowed the player to target specific parts of an enemy during the player's attack. This mechanic persisted in the real-time combat of Fallout 3, acting as a method for targeting specific critical points on an enemy in the heat of battle. True to the franchise, Fallout 3 is heavily focused on role-playing and interactions with NPCs. The player chooses from a set of dialogue options while conversing with an NPC, allowing them to learn about the world, purchase goods, and perhaps coax a character to reveal some useful secrets. The Fallout games, in general, put a lot of emphasis on skills and perks gained through a leveling system. As you level up, you can allocate points to the skills you feel best suit your playstyle. You can also choose from a list of interesting perks that provide you with unique advantages and buffs. Now that everyone's up to speed, let's move on to talking about how Fallout 3 builds its world. The way a game plays sets the stage for how fun and engaging a game is. A game can be missing narrative, have simple mechanics, and still create a fun experience through gameplay alone. In some cases, the opposite can happen to the game's detriment. After a lot of hype surrounding the story of BioShock Infinite died down, some critics stated that the gameplay felt somewhat mismatched for the setting and story, proving how important gameplay is to the narrative. Well thought out gameplay is important to help showcase the ideas and stories a designer wants to put forward. Bethesda switched up the formula established by Interplay Entertainment by moving away from the isometric, point-and-click adventure gameplay and into the increasingly popular first-person shooter camera angle and controls. The developers took advantage of a commonly used and popular format to present a gameplay experience that a large number of players were growing accustomed to. The game presents a fairly intuitive control system in line with other shooters and allows for hotkeying of weapons and items. This allows for a reasonably seamless experience, whether using a keyboard or a controller. This is important for creating a compelling narrative experience because the controls are not distracting or pulling the player out of the experience. You move, look, and shoot as most people would expect. Comparing Bioshock Infinite and Fallout 3, we know the way a game plays can directly affect the way the player perceives the story. Fallout is well renowned for its large, explorable worlds filled with quirky and weird experiences. If it was difficult to explore these spaces due to unintuitive movement and combat controls, then the vast, exciting wasteland would just go to waste. To build a universe, you need to have rules. To build an engaging and immersive world, your rules must be easy to learn and understand. Game mechanics dictate how a player exists in the world that they are playing in and can greatly impact the gameplay and the story. If the mechanics are convoluted and not properly introduced, the player can become alienated from the experience and find themselves frustrated. So what does Fallout 3 do with their mechanics that aids in world building, allowing a player to become immersed? Like I previously mentioned, the FPS style of gameplay allows for most players to easily pick up the game and understand how to navigate and interact. This also puts the player behind the eyes of the protagonist, allowing the player to project themselves onto the main character. Many game designers talk about using this silent protagonist model for this very reason. Some of the most prominent examples being Half-Life's Gordon Freeman and Halo's semi-silent Master Chief. Being so attached to your character also allows for some interesting opportunities to experiment with new experiences. For example, on my most recent playthrough, I chose a female character. Now I've played this game probably 4 or 5 times in total. This is the first time I've ever done that. Having people call me things like ma'am or lady, or using pronouns like she and her when referring to my character, was a new and strange experience for me. I also chose the perk Black Widow pretty early on in the game, which allowed me to use my femininity to manipulate some male characters. Now, that was a weird experience. Flirting with a male character to convince him to give me information felt very strange for a male playing as a female. On the subject of perks, Bethesda has found a way to cram some world building into a mechanic that would otherwise just be used to build stats. There are a number of perks in the list that have larger consequences in the game world. For example, the Cannibal perk allows the player to consume dead bodies and restore health. This act is seen as a crime against nature by NPCs, and the player will be attacked if seen consuming a body. The Lawbringer and Contract Killer perks allow the player to take an ear or a finger from an evil or good NPC respectively, and sell these items for a few extra caps. I feel as though adding a perk to your character is like building their personality. You get to choose over time what kind of character you're becoming, what you're capable of, and what your motivations will be. Understanding the motivations of your character is important for storytelling and for role-playing. This gives a player a place in the world, but we'll talk more about that in the narrative section. The game produces some consistency within the franchise and the game world with a number of mechanics based in the narrative. The player is equipped with a Vault-Tec Pip-Boy 3000, which acts as a menu system for stats, items, and game data. The Pip-Boy maintains the game's core aesthetic with an analog style of visuals in its display and its design. Along with the Pip-Boy comes VATS, or the Vault-Tec Assisted Targeting System. This mechanic was carried over from the previous installments of the franchise, where it was used as a way to tie in turn-based combat into the story. Fallout 1 through Tactics used VATS as an almost like chess mechanic, where the player must make tactical decisions in turn with their enemies. In Fallout 3, it acts as kind of a bullet time aiming tool, allowing the player to target specific points on enemies while time slows to a crawl. How does VATS tie into building an engaging game world? Well, by simply finding a way to tie the mechanic into the story, Bethesda maintains consistency. No matter how small a detail is, this is important for keeping the player engaged. Lastly, I would like to touch on how the game handles exploration, which many would argue is what really draws them to the game. Throughout the game, you have chances to discover map locations through computer terminals, dialogue, or purely by chance. I found this to really create a sense of wonder and mystery. Someone mentions a location in conversation and marks it on your map, so you set out to see what that location has in store. Even as you wander to your destination, you stumble across a number of other areas and encounters, making that one trip its own story. Now in the case of Fallout 3, narrative is a somewhat broad topic. Am I referring to the main quest, quests in general, the lore? The thing about Fallout 3 is that almost all aspects of the game are narrative. The quests, the characters, the locations, the computer terminals that provide background on those locations, everything around you in the world of Fallout 3 is a set piece to set the scene of your own play, your own story. There's even a subset of people out there who haven't even touched the main quest at all, opting to experience the wasteland in their own way. You could even argue, and I'm about to, that the main quest is less of a path to an end game, more of a way for the developers and writers to lead you through storytelling all over the map. As you wander to your destination, you discover new areas, get intrigued by landmarks, and encounter a variety of enemies. Looking at where the main quest takes you, a pattern begins to become apparent. From Megaton into the heart of DC, to Rivet City, and then across the map to Vault 112. The main quest has you bouncing through a number of areas dense with side quests and mysterious goings-on. A questline that does something similar is through Megaton's resident kook, Moira Brown. She enlists your help writing a wasteland survival guide and sends you all over the map. You explore new locations and test interesting gear with promises of bonus rewards if you go the extra mile. And I find this method to be a really clever way of introducing the player to the wasteland. It also gives a little encouragement to the new players that might be a little intimidated with a large open world and need some direction to get them started. Or, you could just kill her and take all of her stuff. The survival guide. Many of the game's quests, including the main story, have a number of entry and exit points, allowing for some interesting non-linear gameplay. You want to explore the DC ruins rather than go to Megaton to search for your dad? Well, you're in luck, because Three Dog the Disc Jockey has some information for you at Galaxy News Radio. Perhaps you immediately started exploring the wasteland after leaving Vault 101 and coincidentally found yourself in another vault where your father is trapped in a computer simulation. Congratulations, you just skipped huge swaths of the main plot. And this non-linear freedom is not only present in the game's main plot. You can often find yourself discovering important quest items, killing key characters, or exploring locations that are part of a questline that you have yet to discover. Maybe because you killed that seemingly random wanderer, you'll meet an NPC who's grateful for your itchy trigger finger. Maybe because you broke a lock on a door, the mystery locked inside it will never be discovered. Fallout 3 is all about choices, and this creates an immersive world that lets you explore, make mistakes, and create your own narrative. This is one of my favorite things about this game, and the main inspiration for the episode. Fallout 3's narrative strength is the world it builds around you. Sometimes there's no context, no explanation, an odd or moving event transpires, causing you to stop for a moment and gape in wonder. These moments can be funny, sad, or just plain absurd. In one instance, I discovered a room where toilet plungers and blood covered the floor, the walls, and were even stuck to items around the room, like a mannequin. In another encounter, I discovered a house of a long-dead family. Skeletons could be found in the beds where they once slept. A dog skeleton lies on the ground outside. The only thing that moves in the house is the family's still functional Mr. Handy butler robot. You can instruct the robot to complete a number of household tasks, such as walk the dog or read the children a poem. If you instruct it to walk the dog, it will approach the dusty dog skeleton and encourage it to get up for a walk. To no avail, obviously. If you instruct it to read the children a poem, it will go into the children's room and recite an oddly relevant poem to the long-dead remains of the children, eerily unfazed by the death and dust that surround it.
Robins will wear their feathery fire, whistling their whims on a low fence wire. And not one will know of the war, not one will care at last when it is done. Not one would mind, neither bird nor tree, if mankind perished utterly.
These moments bring pause to the action and the gunplay for a moment of thought. They cause us to ponder the world we currently inhabit. We wonder who we are in this dark, sad world only now inhabited by ghouls, ghosts, and goblins. Which leads me to what I mentioned earlier about player and character motivations. The key to an engaging role-playing game is to have your player comfortably fill a role. Who is the Lone Wanderer? Are you a sinner or a saint? A hero or a villain? Why do you do what you do? The game allows the player to answer these questions, and it adjusts itself to those answers. People react to you accordingly if you are an evil marauder or a paragon of the wasteland. Skills and perks play into what kind of character you want to be. What are you best suited for? What kind of equipment do you covet? You may take issue to murdering innocent wastelanders, but see nothing wrong in some petty thievery should the opportunity arise. Perhaps you're the reluctant anti-hero rather than the saintly savior. Bethesda gives you a sandbox to explore and cool toys to play with. The rest is up to you.